Welcome to St. John, Nothing Happened Here, with your host Mark Allen Green, a show all about a little city on the east coast of Canada where nothing ever happened. Except for this.
Join us once again as we travel back in time to December the 2nd, 1863. We find ourselves in a dark, dank, and deserted warehouse in the lower west side of St. John. The silence of this place is broken only by gusts of cold harbor wind and the scurry of rats in the rafters overhead. We've gone to some odd places before, but this is one where I don't want to stay any longer than necessary. The door swings open at the far end of the building. Beams from several lanterns flood inside, and light doesn't make this place look any better. It does, however, cause the rats to run for cover. By the sound, there seems to be at least 100 more than I thought. We see a group of men burst in. They talk loudly and push each other around like they were children at a playground. 3 other men follow close behind, but their demeanor is serious and subdued. There's one dapper-looking gentleman who carries with him an air of authority. Accompanied by the other 2 latecomers, he makes his way to an old work table with a few chairs scattered around. The man then reaches into a case and brings out a worn parchment, places it down on the table, and unrolls it for all to see. He then pulls out a bottle of rum. "Drink up, gentlemen," he says as he passes the bottle. "We have much to discuss." The men do so without hesitation, and the way they're going through it, I hope the gentleman brought a second bottle, maybe even a third. A rough-looking man pushes his way through those crowded around the table and places his finger on the parchment. "So what you got here?" he says. Though he could simply read it to answer his question, that appears likely outside his skill set. A smile comes across the gentleman's face. "That, my friend, is my commission as an officer signed and sealed by the President of the Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis himself." An audible gasp comes from the men, who look wide-eyed at the document. For a moment, no one even takes a swig from the bottle. "It is also a letter of marque and reprisal. This allows myself and men under my commission to come upon any Yankee vessel and plunder it for all she has. Think about it, boys. Not only would you have the honor of serving the Confederate government and preserving the South, untold riches will lie ahead. Who's with me?" The men do not need any more convincing. They all raise an eager hand. Another man comes forward and introduces himself as Lieutenant Commander John Clibben Brain. He is a smooth-talking gentleman with a charm that seems to put everyone under his spell. He could likely tell the men to jump off the Reversing Falls Bridge, and they would simply ask, feet first or swan dive. "We have received our orders and our commissions," Lieutenant Commander Brain states, "and I shall read them aloud that all may hear and bind themselves to this noble mission before us." He clears his throat and raises a parchment. "You are hereby ordered to proceed to the city of New York and the state of said with the following: First Lieutenant H.A. Parr, Second Lieutenant David Collins, Sailing Master George Robinson, and a crew of 11 men. You will on arrival there engage passage on board the steamer and use your discretion as to the proper time and place of capture. Your actions toward the crew and passengers will be strictly in accordance with the President's instructions. You will, as circumstances permit, bring your prize to the island of Grand Manan for further orders. Seal Cove Harbor, if accessible." Brain rolls up the parchment and slams it down upon the table. we depart for New York tomorrow. May fortune favor us all, and may God save the South. The ear-splitting shriek of the rebel yell comes from the men, and then they depart into the night from where they came. If the mission is a success, this band of St. John men will have themselves a Confederate privateer vessel from which they can become the scourge of the Atlantic seaboard. If they fail, these St. Johners just might pull the entire British Empire into the American Civil War. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. My name is Mark, and over there we have Troy Middleton, our guest host for this episode, and somewhere behind him is the adorable and adorable and iconic Sergeant Blue. And that means it's time for St. John, Nothing Happened Here, with the exception of the Chesapeake affair during the American Civil War. Now, I guess we should introduce everyone to Sergeant Blue. Sergeant Blue is the most adorable little chihuahua and well-behaved, and he dresses in a Union uniform from the American Civil War.
That's one of his many uniforms.
That's one of his many uniforms. And you, Troy, are part of the 20th of Maine?
Yes, 20th Company I of the 20th Maine.
Which is a American Civil War reenactors group based in Atlantic Canada. So you are the guy to talk about the American Civil War from the St. John contingent. Thank you for coming on the show. And let's get into the Chesapeake affair, Troy. Why there isn't a movie about this? It should be at least a made-for-TV movie. My Lord, it has everything.
It should be.
The espionage, the betrayal, the backstabbing. It's an incredible story, and we're going to get into it. And all was hatched in St. John with a bunch of St. Johners, and it had the risk of bringing the British into the American Civil War fighting against the United States.
Yeah, and that wasn't the only close call, I guess you could say, between the British North American colonies and Great Britain and the United States during this time period.
We're getting into the Chesapeake affair, not to be confused with the Chesapeake affair, because we're talking about the Chesapeake affair, because there was another Chesapeake affair in 1807. That's not the one. We're talking about the Chesapeake affair of 1863. Now, we got to give some context, Troy, and we got to do what we're famous for on St. John Nothing Happens Here, and that is 3 to 4 minutes of explaining a very complicated topic, and that is what was the origins of the American Civil War. Now, Troy, I think I can do it in 4 minutes.
Well, I'm not sure, considering there's entire university courses on this subject.
I know. I didn't say it was going to be easy. When did I say it was going? No, I think I'm going to do it. And you are a Civil War buff, and you can evaluate if I even got into the ballpark and tried to explain this extremely complicated thing that's spanned decades in its formation of the American Civil War. So are you ready for this?
All right. I'm all set.
Let's go. So I would say the start of the American Civil War happened in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. And what the opening line of it was this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, all men are created equally. That raised the question of how about the enslaved people? Now, Thomas Jefferson originally condemned slavery when he drafted the Declaration of Independence, but then decided to remove it out of fear of offending the South and to go, you know what, we'll defer that question. We'll deal with it later. What could possibly go bad with this?
Those particular delegates would not have signed
They would not have signed. So then the North and the South of the U.S. went separate ways. The North began to industrialize, which did not rely upon slavery, and the South stuck with the plantations that relied heavily on slavery. So you had the abolitionists in the North, and there were 11 free states in 1819. Now, I'd say, Troy, it was less about moral issues and more about land issues. There was concern that the plantations in the South would start expanding up to the north and taking away land. But then we had, in the South, we had 11 slave states by 1819. So we had a balance between the free states and the slave states. Then Missouri came online as the 23rd state, and that was a slave state. Then we had Maine coming in as the 24th state, which was a free state. But again, we had that balance between the free and the slave states. And balance was important because there was the thought that the majority could impose their will upon others. Then they decided to do this, Troy, the Missouri Compromise line. So they go, anything north of the Missouri Compromise line will be free. Anything south will be a slave state where slavery is allowed. So that was fine until I would say this happened. Texas. So United States annexed Texas from Mexico and made it a state. And then we had the American and Mexico War in 1848, which the Americans won, creating more U.S. territories and states, which started disrupting the balance once again. Throw in this, the desire to build a national railway, and there was the desire from the South to use slave labor to build that. So then we have to bring in Kansas and Nebraska territories, which were north of the Missouri Compromise line. So they should have been free states, but then there were arguments about this because of the railway. So there was a proposal, okay, we'll settle it this way. Why don't we just let the people of Kansas and Nebraska decide whether they should be free or slave state? And they go, okay, that's a great idea. And then settlers from both factions started moving into Kansas and Nebraska to sway the vote. No surprise, violence ensued. And you had something that was called Bleeding Kansas from 1854 to 1861. Now, Kansas and Nebraska eventually voted to be free. And then comes in this, and I didn't know about this, the Republican Party was formed as abolitionist to counter the Southern Democrats. So we had the Republican Party and the Southern Democrats going at it in Congress, and it got heated. Troy, it got heated. Violence ensued on the floor of the Senate.
Oh, yeah, there were senators beating other senators with their canes and everything.
With a cane. A brutal beating with a cane. So we think Congress is heated now? Nothing like on the eve of the American Civil War. Okay, we had that heating up. And in 1859, we had John Brown. He was an abolitionist. He had the Harper Ferry raid. So his plan was to start a slave revolt. But in comes the United States Marines under the control of Robert E. Lee. And he quashed that uprising. And back to the free states and the slave states, the free states now at this point outnumbered the slave states. So you did not have that balance. Bring in the 1860 presidential election where Republican Abraham Lincoln wins. And the South goes, we've had enough with that. So Southern states started seeking independence from the United States 1860 to 1861 and created what was called the Confederate States of America under President Jefferson Davis in 1861. And the capital is Richmond, Virginia. So we have the capital of the United States, which was Washington, D.C. Lincoln declares that secession is a rebellion. And the first shots of the American Civil War was by the Confederacy at Fort Sumter, April 12, 1861, which kicked off the war. And we should know this, the war began as, no, it's preservation of the Union. It has nothing to do with slavery. But the North had this naval superiority at the time and created a blockade around the South, which stopped goods from going to Europe. Very important goods being cotton. So European powers were like, we don't like this. And they were kind of going, should we get involved in this? And then Abraham Lincoln goes, well, we better change the narrative. And in 1863, January 1st, he did the Emancipation Proclamation, said this war is not about keeping the Union together. It's about the abolishment of slavery, which the European powers go, well, we haven't had slavery for decades, so we can't be seen as fighting against that. And that brings us to where we need to be. Probably a little bit more than 4 minutes. So how did I do, Troy, in my...
Not bad.
my very condensed history of the Civil War. Did I get a passing grade from you?
Yeah, I'll give you a B.
Okay, thanks. Same score Peter gave me for the beginnings of the American Revolution. He said, I may give you an A- on it. Okay, let's bring in the Maritime. So which side did the Maritimers go on? Was it on the Union side or a Confederate side at the beginning?
It all kind of depends on where you were living at the time and what your business interests were.
Let's bring St. John into it.
Well, St. John, being a port city, same with Halifax in Nova Scotia, commerce was the lifeblood. It was the shipping. And a lot of people seen the Civil War as money-making opportunity, and a lot of people supported the South. And it's not necessarily rooted in their belief in slavery. A lot of it had to do with their dislike of the U.S. government.
And we'll get into that because that's kind of brings it a little bit into history repeating itself, but we'll explain that in a bit. But yes, Maritimers seemed to go originally overwhelming in support of the Union. But as you're saying, the trade balance made it so, someone has to support the South in providing them with the basics because they're under a blockade and we can make some serious money by trading with the South. So there was a lot of business interest in happening with that. So British arms and supplies went through Halifax to the south, and I believe it went through St. John.
Yeah. I haven't found hard proof on this, but I've found anecdotes where a lot of influential people in St. John, including the mayor at the time, who was involved in importing and exporting goods, was bringing arms in from England and sending them south.
Scandalous.
Yes, because John C. Howard, the American consulate at the time here in St. John, he basically worked as a spy for the U.S. government. Well, he worked for the U.S. government, and he would keep track of all the ships coming and going out of the harbor. And any ship that he considered suspect, he would notify the authorities, the mayor's office and stuff like that. And quite a few times the mayor told him to leave his office. There's a little bit of smoke there. Whether there's fire or not, we're not sure.
We'll see. Stay tuned as we uncover more.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have here, as you were saying, there was a fear of the power of the United States, the Union side of it, because they were becoming very powerful. And then they started beaking off about this. Should I say beaking off? Is that a bit of a strong word? The whole manifest destiny. They started to talk about, it's only a matter of time before the United States will fulfill its destiny of controlling the entire continent of North America. And so there was worry at the time.
There's several times they sent troops up here.
They have, and there was the worry, and this might sound a little bit on point to today, is that they were going to make us the 35th state at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe not the 51st back then, but the 35th state at the time. Okay, so there was a concern about this. And then we have to bring it into what's happening with the piracy and the Chesapeake affair. The Confederacy issued what was called letters of marque and reprisal to vessels, which allowed them to legally engage in piracy, better known as privateering. And this is a fun fact, I think, Troy. This was the last major belligerent to use privateering. Everyone had tossed that out the window as a really bad idea by the time.
It was in the decade or so before the Civil War broke out that all the major powers signed treaties saying we're going to do away with the letters of marque, except for the United States. They never signed it. Now, the Union did not engage in privateering during the Civil War.
The Confederacy was the only one who actually engaged and gave letters of marque. So it was a one-sided privateer thing, but that opened up the doors to maybe some enterprising St. Johners to take advantage of the last opportunity to be the scourge of the Atlantic seaboard. So let's bring it into how did St. John get involved with this? And we have to talk about the Confederate privateer vessel called the Retribution. What was that?
The Retribution was the original ship, and I believe it started its life as a steam tug on the Great Lakes.
Oh, it was a tugboat. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a tugboat. Not a very good tugboat at that.
No.
So they converted it. They threw on some supports, threw a couple of cannons on it, and they made it the scourge of the Mississippi. I don't know where did it run again?
I can't remember.
It was a scourge of some river, okay? So it was, but it wasn't.
It didn't last long.
Oh, it wasn't a good vessel. It wasn't. No. So it was not seaworthy soon, but they had a letter of marque and reprisal from President Davis.
Allegedly.
Oh, the Retribution had it. And then it became unseaworthy and had to be scuttled. And then the captain Captain Powers, he goes, okay, you know what, we're done with this. And then there was another person. His name was Vernon Guyan, I believe, Locke, a.k.a. Captain John Parker was his alias. And he goes, excuse me, Captain Powers, this might be a little bit awkward, but could I have that letter of marque? Could I just have it, just for posterity? And then the captain goes, okay, well, sure. It's useless. It could only be used for the Retribution. And he goes, that's what you think. Wait for it. Wait for it, Captain Powers.
I'm gonna jump in there. Vernon Locke was a Nova Scotian
and a British citizen.
Yes.
So that was important. He was the second in command of the Retribution, and he got a liking for privateering. It was profitable, right? And he could go and do pretty much anything he wanted. He wanted to get more of a taste. So he goes, I got to get this back. I have a letter of marque, but I don't have a vessel. He knew that being a British citizen, he was facing some serious consequences if he were caught because of the British neutrality. So that's why he went under the alias of Captain John Parker, so he wouldn't get caught, or he would have some plausible deniability of who he was if he got caught. Yeah. So he goes, got to get another vessel. And he ended up meeting a man. Tell me the man he met in Jersey City. What was his name?
John Bryan.
John Brain. John Clibben Brain. His name was the Brain. And I'd say actually he was the brains of the operation. This guy was a confidence man. He was a world-class con man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he spent time in jail because of it and everything.
Oh, he ever landed in jail, or did he talk his way out of it?
No, he spent time in jail. He claimed he was working for the Southern government, Knights of the Golden Circle. Kind of a secret organization, and he was actually making notes and maps of the railway systems up north under the guise that he was writing a pamphlet on for travel.
Okay,
and they actually locked him up. I think it was after a couple of months or whatever. They kicked him out of the country anyway. And he ended up in British North America.
He ended up doing what he does best.
Well, yeah.
And that is scamming people. So you have Locke and you have Brain getting together going, here's my plan, Brain. We need to get ourselves a ship and get back in the privateering business. Of course, Brain being a con man going, I love this. Now, I think if he were successful, Troy, he would have conned Locke. He would have taken everything. Like he was that good of a con man.
Boy, he was shady.
He was shady. He was shady. And then they start talking. They go, okay, well, we got to get a crew. Where is a big hotbed of pro-Confederate secessionists? And they go, probably want to try Halifax, Nova Scotia. So that's where Locke originally went. But he ended up talking to some people and they go, yeah, this is probably not the best place to be plotting this because no, Halifax is a little ways away from the United States. You probably want proximity. Troy, it's location. So they go, we know another hotbed for the Confederacy. That's this place called St. John, New Brunswick. Why don't you go there? And he goes, great idea. So Locke takes off to St. John, New Brunswick. Tell us about the meeting in the west side of St. John. So we have Locke there, we have Brain, and then we have another man by the name of Parr. It's Henry Parr?
Henry, yes. Yeah.
Who might have been a Confederate. He was the only one who was a legitimate Confederate.
The rest of the crew, all from New Brunswick, and a lot of them were from the St. John area. Round them up in the drinking establishments of the port.
You know what we have to do? We need to get a crew. Okay, we got a plan, Troy. We're going to go capture a Union vessel and make it the scourge of the Atlantic. So we're going to take it over, and that's going to be our new pirate vessel. Arr!
Arr.
Okay, we need to get a crew. Where was the meeting? It was on the lower west side. And it was in a warehouse that everyone got together kind of in secrecy to start talking about it. And supposedly it took 2 meetings. The first meeting didn't go that well. They didn't convince anyone to come on board. The second meeting went well. But we had Brain comes in and Locke comes in. And we should say this. Locke, without any authority, because he didn't have any real connection to the Confederacy, gave Brain the rank of lieutenant commander in the Confederate Army.
Yep.
And Brain, I think, was smart enough to know that doesn't mean anything, but I'm going to leverage it. So he goes to this meeting and goes, hey, look at me. I'm a lieutenant commander of the Confederate Army. And a bunch of St. Johners go, ooh, wow. And what did Brain do next? I got something better. I have this official letter of marque and reprisal from the Confederate government, signed by Jefferson Davis. And everyone went, ooh, like the oxygen, Troy, sucked out of the room when they were the ooh, the ah. And this will allow us to go down and we can seize a vessel in the United States. And then we can become privateers, not pirates. Don't confuse it with piracy because this is legitimate. Letter of marque. We can become privateers. Who's up for this? And what did the St. Johners in the meeting go?
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Well, they go, well, excuse me for a second. What's in it for us? And supposedly they were promised $500 if they were successful, which would have been equivalent to $10,000 in today's money. So not a bad payday. And
then a share of whatever cargo and ships.
Yeah, but captured. Brain would have scammed them out of that. Brain would have scammed them out of the $500. So Locke gives Brain the orders to capture the vessel that they had been scouting out for a while called the Chesapeake. And it was a cargo vessel, right? We'll get into that a bit more, but they said, go get it and bring it back to Grand Manan. That was the plan. So that was the order that Locke, being a Confederate, which he wasn't, gave to his lieutenant commander, who wasn't a lieutenant commander because there was no authority for any of this. But Brain goes, okay, I'm going to start picking my crew. And he goes, Mr. Pars, please step forward. You are now first lieutenant on this mission. And David Collins of St. John, New Brunswick, you are the second lieutenant. Sailing master is going to be Thomas Sayers. And first engineer will be a guy named Smith. So he started appointing people, and he had a crew of 22 by the end of it. There was an article in the St. John Globe talking about this after the fact, talking about this meeting. And can I give you the quote from the newspaper about the attendance at that first meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready for this, Troy?
Yep.
They were described as the worst species of humanity, denominated roughs, one of them being just out of the penitentiary.
Yes.
And that's the description of our fellow St. Johners.
Yes, I didn't want to say the dregs of society, but yeah, they were the dregs of society.
What was the other term they used a lot? The Great Unwashed?
The Great Unwashed, yeah.
The Globe did not think much about this pirate crew. And this is important. There were 3 St. Johners, David Collins, James McKinney, and Linus Seeley. Now, Linus would have been the guy straight out of the pen.
Yeah, he was the jailbird.
He was the jailbird, but those guys are going to be really important. So the St. John men were told, okay, this is what we do. Who is with me? Who's against me? And everyone goes, we're with you, Brain. We're with you. So now it is time to do it. We have our crew. We have our fake appointments as members of the Confederate Army. We have our letter of marque, which is not worth the parchment it's printed on because it was related to the retribution, and we're off. So the St. Johners got conned. What do you think? Were the St. Johners conned?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they thought it was an easy score, but yeah.
But I don't think Brain had any intention of ever following through with any of the promises. He was just going to dupe them. But they were all gung-ho on this. So let's get it to December the 3rd, 1863, when the men of St. John, led by Brain, Locke was not there. Locke took off, right? Locke was going to wait for the vessel in Grand Manan. And they go, it is time to go to New York City aboard a steamer called the New England. Did you read about the reaction of the captain of the New England when these 16 roughs got on board?
If I remember correctly, he kind of eyed them a little suspiciously.
Well, he thought they were going to take over his vessel, which maybe they might have, but they got so enamored by the Chesapeake, they go, okay, we'll leave this one. But I bet they were scoping it out going, we could go all the way to New York City, or we got this right here. Should we just take it?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say what was going through their minds, I suppose.
Well, we can only it's speculating, right? But here might have been the difference maker, Troy, is they didn't have any guns. So this was part of the plot, was the men went to New York City and then they went to the back room of a secret store where they were given a package. And what was in the package?
Yeah, pistols, handcuffs.
Yeah, handcuffs. And what do you have to put in a pistol?
Oh, ammunition.
Ammo. They were given their package, and then it's time to go. The target vessel was the Chesapeake. Now, the Chesapeake was a 600-ton propeller vessel. It was 10 years old, but it was seaworthy, right? Yeah. It was good enough. It was valued, the vessel and the cargo that it had, $160,000 at the time.
Yeah, the cargo was actually worth more than the ship itself.
Yeah.
The cargo they had on board. So they picked a good ship.
Well, it's $4 to $5 million in today's money. It carried a crew of 18 and 22 passengers. Now did we have 16 or 17? I was trying to do the math behind this, and it seemed like some sources were saying 16 in total. Some seemed to say 16 plus Brain.
Well, a couple of men that went to New York with the crew, they partied too hard the night before they left, and they were hungover and didn't get on the ship.
St. John.
And they were actually the men that were supposed to operate the boiler.
They got drunk and missed the ship.
Yes. Yep. They missed their boarding.
This is a comedy of errors. This really
there's
is.
Lots of them.
There's lots of. Okay, so that's how. Because I was wondering, they had 22 people originally, and then got down to 16 because they got drunk in the Big Apple.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so we got enough guys that were sober enough that 16, I think, plus Brain, boarded the ship. They all paid for their fare to board the Chesapeake with one exception, Brain. Get this, Troy, what did Brain do?
He scammed his way onto the ship.
He scammed his way onto the ship. He wouldn't even pay his 2 bits.
Claimed he was a representative of a British steamship company.
And they bought it.
They bought it.
Sir, right away, sir. Get this man a cocktail. That's so funny. Okay, can we just talk a moment about the Patapsco bottle. Are you aware of that? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Patapsco?
You'll have to jog my memory.
Okay. Before the Chesapeake was taken, someone found a message in the bottle, and it said that all the same facts of this, saying we have been hijacked. The Papsico was the vessel that was claimed. We have been hijacked at this location. Please send help. Now, the thing is, it was exactly the same as the Chesapeake facts, except there was no vessel ever called the Papsico. Do you think that might have been a false flag that was planted by Brain and the crew to try to get the authorities looking in another direction as they were about to hijack the Chesapeake?
It's quite possible.
It's multi-layered, Troy, the story. It's got everything. Again, please, some producer out there, a movie producer, pick this story up. It's incredible. But okay, Brain and his crew get on the ship December the 5th, 1863, to take a trip from New York City to Portland, Maine. 2 days on board, so they're all just acting normal. And remember, they take up the majority. It's a 22-passenger vessel. They have 17. So there's only 5 who are not involved in this plot. And on December the 7th, 1863, at 1:15 a.m., off the coast of Cape Cod, it was go time. And what was the first thing that happened? Tell me about the engine room. So you have George Wade is going to play into this. So he's one of the... Was George Wade a St. Johner? I think he was.
Yes.
Because his dad lived in St. John. So I'm assuming he was a St. Johner.
Yeah. Well, depending on whose account of the engine room part of this story, whether you believe the... I'm going to call them the civilians on board, the captain of the ship and his crew, or if you believe the testimony of the accused.
The con man? So do we do we trust the victims of this, or do we trust the pirates and the con men? I'm going to lean one way. I don't know about you, Troy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they when they burst into the engine room, they shot first and asked questions later.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. So who did they shoot? Who was the person?
Owen Schaffer. He was the second engineer.
Yeah, so he came up the stairs. There's 3 guys there at the top of the stairs armed. This is the account of one of them. One said he had a gun, and they searched afterwards to see if he had a gun. He did not have a gun. There was nothing. No. There wasn't even a gun in his stateroom. So he did not have a gun. But then they kind of changed the story a bit, Troy, and they go, well, he had a hose in his hand, and he was
tried to burn us with scalding water.
Yeah, scalding water. But then that was myth busted. There was no way he could do it, but maybe he was feigning it. But instead of them taking a rational approach, like put that down, what did they do to poor Owen?
They shot him.
Shot him in the face.
Yeah.
And then Owen kept on coming. And they shot him twice again. And finally, that was enough for Owen, and he lay dead on the floor. We're having a bit of fun with the story, but this was serious, right? People did get hurt. Yeah, 1 person got killed. 2 people got hurt. So it was George Wade from St. John who fired the deadly shots.
That's what they say.
The shots were fired. Other people were going, what's going on? So we had Charles Johnson. He was the first mate. He ran to Captain Willett's stateroom to alert him, but did he go unmolested the entire way?
Well, I'm not sure about the first mate, but I know when the captain stuck his head out the door, someone shot at him.
Yeah, well, guess what? They shot at the first mate as he was trying to get to the captain. Okay, let's just for a second discuss how dangerous this is. This was an excessive use of force. There was no one firing back in close quarters. One thing, I think it was kind of stupid of them to be firing this kind of shots. There's ricochets and everything that can happen in a ship like this, but they were firing at unarmed people.
And if you go back to the gunfire in the engine room, if they puncture the boiler, the ship could have blew up.
Oh, no, a lot of bad things could happen. I think that gives us an idea of the sophistication of these guys. They weren't very sophisticated. They freaked out. I would say that whole thing after Owen went down was just a freak out. They were firing at everything.
Yeah.
The captain, you're right. So first mate goes in, Captain, we're being hijacked. Oh, Captain peeks his head out. What happens?
They shoot at him.
They shoot at him. He goes and he starts running, and he goes and finds Owen.
Yeah, Schaefer was halfway out of the hatch, coming up out of the engine room.
Before the final deadly shot, right? So, so he goes over to see if Owen's okay, and he's checking for a pulse, and what do the pirates do?
They shoot at him again.
They shoot at him again! As he's trying to help out the guy who's down. The captain runs into the pilot room. That's where he's met by, who is it?
Parr.
Oh, it was Parr. It was Henry Parr was there. And it's kind of a movie moment in my mind, Troy. The pistol went to the back of his head as he was looking down at like the controls or something going, "You are now prisoner of the Confederate States."
Confederate States. Yeah.
Hands up. Hands up. And that's what the captain did. The captain surrendered. And with the melee, 2 people were seriously injured. Johnson and Johnson. The Johnson, they weren't brothers. They were just 2 guys by the name of Johnson. One was Charles Johnson, and then there was James Johnson. Now, James Johnson, where did he take a bullet to?
He took it in the chin.
He took it in the chin. And then Charles, he took one too. He didn't take one. He took 2.
Yeah, one in the leg and one in the arm.
They're brought in. The captain is put in irons, I guess the handcuffs that they had acquired in New York City. And then they bring in the injured people, put them in shackles. Now, this is kind of, again, an incredible part of the story. Henry Parr just happened to be, I believe, a field surgeon and was able to remove the bullets, but he couldn't get the one out of...
I tried to look into Parr and what his medical experience was, and it could have been just something as simple as being like a doctor's assistant, pharmacist assistant, but he had some medical knowledge. He pulled the bullets out of one of them anyway.
He did, and he tried the second one. So you got some people seriously injured here. They're not letting them go. Now it's the escape. They now have control of the Chesapeake, and now they have to finish their mission and get it to Grand Manan in New Brunswick. First, they sail to Mount Desert, which is just in Maine. They stop there for a while and then move on. Here's the thing that I kind of find funny. They relieve the captain of all the papers and everything, and they do this. This is kind of just so St. John. We paid money to be on this vessel. Now we own it. Give us our fare back.
Yeah, I think it was something like $87 they took from
give it to
captain.
us. We demand a refund because
the ship's been captured.
We didn't pay for that. but guys, you were the ones who hijacked it. I don't care. Look at our contract.
I want my money back.
I want my money back. They got their money back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then they end up going towards Grand Manan, where they picked up Locke. Locke came out in a pilot boat and assumed command of his new vessel, the Chesapeake, under a completely useless letter of marque.
Piece of paper.
Yeah, but it's coal driven, right? Troy, we need to refuel. Where are we going to refuel?
Head for St. John.
St. John! We're heading to St. John. At St. John, they finally let the prisoners go, including the captain, but they kept 5. I guess essential guys. There were 3 firemen and 2 engineers, I believe.
Yeah, they had to keep a couple of the Chesapeake's crew because they knew how to run the boilers and stuff. Because the guys they brought with them were still nursing their hangover in New York.
Yeah, there we go. So you have to improvise, Troy. You have to.
Yeah.
People might get drunk.
Apparently, they had made arrangements to get coal in St. John, but the ship that was supposed to come out and meet them never showed up, so they couldn't recoal.
Now, why didn't they show up? The theory was that they didn't have cash, and They said, nope, without cash, we're not giving you your coal. What's your thoughts about that theory?
I'm thinking that somebody didn't get the memo, maybe, that the ship was supposed to come out and meet them.
Okay.
Because later on in the story, they do, even though they have no money, they still able to, get a ship to come to recoal.
Oh, and we're going to see how they did it. And that probably was their downfall about how they paid for it later on. But maybe they didn't have the cash. But what they said, of course, to the captain and everyone that they put on the boat going, we're releasing you. They go, shh, don't tell anyone what happened or we'll come get you. And the first thing the captain did was he told everyone what happened and called the owners of the Chesapeake.
The telegraph wire was hot with messages before the ship was out of sight.
Oh, exactly. Go, no, yeah, we won't tell anyone. And go, okay, they're gone. Now let's spill the beans. And then what was the reaction of the U.S. government, the U.S. military?
They started dispatching ships to track these rascals down.
Oh, yeah. So they started scrambling vessels on December the 10th and ordered them to go to the Bay of Fundy. They sent the USS Asia, I believe it's pronounced, the USS Agawam, the USS Ticonderoga, and the USS Niagara. They scrambled them to the Bay of Fundy. Now, what is the big deal about that? Troy, do they have any business in the Bay of Fundy? U.S. warships?
No, not really.
British neutrality. Violating British neutrality. And then they send a sweet named vessel called the Ella and the Annie, becoming the USS Malvern, but it was Captain Nichols. The other vessels were having a bunch of problems getting out, but the Ella and Annie was able to get out. So the Chesapeake goes, geez, okay, we can't refuel in St. John. We got to head to Nova Scotia where we can hopefully get some help in Halifax, because again, Halifax is the other hotbed of succession at the time. So they could have Confederate support. They hit a gale. Didn't go well for them. They hit a gale, and then they had a shelter in Shelburne, Nova Scotia.
You're bound to get a winter storm in December around the Bay of Fundy.
They didn't plan that well, right?
No.
Tis not the season to hijack a vessel and take it to New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. It is not.
Well, if you're going to hijack it, I'd be heading south pretty quick with it.
Well, there's a lot of things, Troy, they could have done. There's a lot of things they could have done that they didn't. But here's the problem. This was their absolute downfall that took any sort of legitimacy out of it.
Yes.
They stopped at Shelburne. They got the fuel, but to pay for it, they sold some of the cargo. Why is that an absolute no-no if they were trying to keep up this narrative of being a privateer?
It has to do with the rules surrounding, letters of marque and capturing an enemy vessel at sea until it goes through the court system.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any entitlement to the ship or the cargo until it goes through the proper channels. Admiralty Court?
Vice Admiralty Court. Troy, there's a little bit of bureaucracy around privateering.
Oh, a little bit. Oh, yeah.
It ain't easy. It's not like piracy. It's privateering. You have to go and you have to prove your claim. You cannot sell the cargo until the Admiralty Court goes, yep, we agree this is a legitimate prize, and you can start splitting it, and then it has to be split amongst the investors and everything. Like it's a process. They bypassed it. So as soon as they sold, they took any legitimacy out of being a privateer, and they were pirates. And they ran afoul, which this was an important thing to give the Canadians, well, the soon-to-be Canadians, but people from the Nova Scotia colony in New Brunswick, was the ability to charge them because revenue violations.
Yes.
Yeah, so you took in revenue and you didn't pay your taxes. We're getting just like Al Capone a few decades later. That's how they would end up getting them. So they go, okay, they have enough fuel, still go time. They end up heading to, well, they hit a bunch of places, and they were selling cargo the entire way around. And Brain almost got caught once.
Yeah. And at one point he got off the ship and said, I'm going to go make arrangements for coal or something like that. And he basically left them high and dry, took part of the cargo, took the money,
went to a post office where he was almost caught, but then the post mistress took him and hid him, and I'm sure he charmed her. You could just get that sense, like reading between the lines of the narratives.
Yeah, because at the post office was the captain of the Ella Nanny. He was there sending a telegraph to the U.S. War Department. That it's almost like an Abbott Costello movie. One guy's in this side of the door and the guy's in the other side of the door.
My brain was like, what a small world. The guy who's after me, and we're at the same post office, but they hid him away and he escaped capture. But then they hired 4 other members of the crew, I guess, to deal with their losses in New York City, and sold cargo in Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and New Dublin. Okay, and then we have to go in for the capture. So we're in Sambro Harbor, just outside of Halifax, where there's a lot of Confederate support. And here comes the Ellie and Annie. So,
well, before that, they did have arrangements to have a schooner come and coal. And so that schooner was in Sambro Harbor as well.
A British ship under British sovereignty, which was really important. So it came out to the Chesapeake in the harbor. It was going to refuel. So you have the Chesapeake and a British ship. And remember, Troy, this is right under the guns of Halifax, that this Confederate thing is happening, this Confederate swap. It's right under the noses, and the Halifax military, they're just letting this happen, right? They must have been aware of this was going on. Like the Chesapeake, I believe, was flying the Confederate flag.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
In comes the Ellie and Anna, and Captain Nichols going, gotcha. Oh, I got you. I've been chasing you over the high seas. You thought you got away in Bridgewater? Well, guess what? I'm on you. And he thinks it's early in the morning, so he thinks they're sleeping. So he goes full steam ahead, and he comes at it. Now, Locke sees that this vessel's coming at him, and he knows who they are. He knows he's being chased. So what does Locke do?
He runs up the national colors, the U.S. flag, but upside down to advertise that the ship's in distress.
Ship's in distress.
Yeah, which gave him permission to approach because this was British waters.
Locke sees it coming in. Locke orders full steam ahead. It couldn't be done because they couldn't get the steam going. So Locke didn't really understand the vessel. Then he ordered the ship to be scuttled. And the crew goes, how do we do that? I don't know. How do we sink a vessel this quickly? So they can't do that. And then they order abandon ship.
Oh, yeah. It's just rats from a sinking ship.
So they take off. Then the Ella and Annie's coming in hard. And they board the ship. It would have been U.S. military. Boarded the ship and found all but 2 had escaped. They took 2 people into custody. Now, were they drunk and didn't hear the abandoned ship?
Hard to say. I don't.
Why were they? Why did they stay? We don't know. Annals of history is where that is, but we don't know. And then this was brazen in British waters. The armed U.S. crew boards the British vessel, the Investigator, and starts searching them. Now, the British officer aboard demanded that the U.S. produce their authority to board, and this is a classic line. This is why it would be such a great movie. One produced a pistol and said,
This is my
authority. I hope someone did a slow clap. Everyone was like, oh, yeah. That was great. So the U.S. officers searched, and then they found George Wade hiding under a buffalo robe.
Oh, yeah. He was hoping they wouldn't find him.
No one will find me under this buffalo robe. So they find him. They take him into custody. They now have 3. Remember, George Wade is the guy who shot and killed the engineer. Schaefer. So that was a big capture. And then it keeps going. So Captain Nichols was like, look at me. I'm Captain Nichols. None of you other U.S. vessels could ever find the Chesapeake. I found it, and I'm going to bring it back in victory to U.S. waters. So he starts to tow it out of Halifax. He's like, yay, 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 look at me. Then comes Captain Clary in the USS Dakota.
And he outranks Nichols.
And yes, and what did Captain Clary say to Nichols?
He says, we have to bring this vessel into Halifax and have the Admiralty basically rubber stamp our capture of this ship and allow us to bring it back to the United States. If not, we're violating British neutrality.
Well, we just brought in 2 warships into British waters and a few more floating someplace and captured a vessel. And without even consulting, we're going to be taking this vessel out. So Clary was smart. He saw a international incident written all over this and goes, Nichols, you back this right around and you bring it back to Halifax. Nichols was like, you gotta be kidding. But he was outranked, so he goes, okay, fine. So he has to eat crow a little bit and go, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have captured the Chesapeake without the British being aware of it. And, probably shouldn't have boarded that British vessel under the authority of a gun. Probably that was the wrong thing to do. So they're bringing the Chesapeake back in. They did not want to release the 3 prisoners, because the U.S. believed those were legitimate prisoners of the U.S. because they committed felony murder, at least. Well, George Wade would have been murder. The rest are felony murder, which is murder still, and piracy. So they wanted to take them back to the U.S. They were going to do that. And then it got heated in Halifax. And basically what they were saying is, if you take those prisoners, we're going to blow your ships right out of the water. And you can imagine how that could have turned into an international incident.
Now, the North Atlantic, the British fleet was actually not in, because it was wintertime, they sailed to warmer waters. Mm-hmm. But the garrison of the fort was put on standby and ready to man the guns.
It's a standoff in Halifax Harbor with 3 St. Johners on board. I believe all 3 of them were from St. John. George Wade, definitely. Were the other 2? Possibly Halifax?
Sealy,
Or Nova Scotia. Sealy was in there? Okay. Finally, they negotiated, we will hand over the prisoners. We will bring them in by boat, rowboat, and to the wharf. Okay. The U.S. consulate was there on the wharf. And there was the sheriff ready to take them into custody. And then there was a bunch of pro-Confederate supporters.
Yes.
Including one who was Dr. Allman, who's going to play into this. And then the other fun fact, the other pro-Confederate who was there was whom? Troy?
Alexander Keith Jr.
Yes, not to be confused with Alexander Keith. He was the nephew of Alexander Keith. So they're sitting there, and somehow they convince them to unshackle the prisoners, going, oh, come on, they've been through enough. Their arms, they need just a little bit of a stretch. Can you unshackle them? For some reason, they go, okay, sure. And then the Confederate guys on the shore, they create a distraction as 2 described as strong-armed fishermen row up, and then Allman goes into Wade, into his ear, and goes, go. Yeah. And Wade goes, okay, and jumps on the ship. So they take off, they jump on, and they start rowing away. And then the sheriff goes, no, you're not. You get back there, takes out his pistol. Then Allman started struggling with him. And I think Alexander Keith Jr. got into the melee, and they all fell into the wharf. They fell off the wharf into the water. And George Wade is just going, see ya, suckers.
Oh, yeah. Just row faster, boys. Row faster.
And never was heard of again. He got away.
Yeah.
Okay, so Allman and the 2 others, presumably Alexander Keith Jr., they were arrested, charged with aiding and abetting, but were released basically with a reprimand. Maybe Allman had to pay a small fine, but that was it. A lot of Confederate support in Halifax.
Oh, for sure. The way it played out, the way, I guess the rumor is that Allman had got these 2 guys that were, very strong rowers to come over to the wharf to have these guys jump in. He argued against that during his hearing because that would mean it was premeditated. And he said, no, it just all happened all at once. And they believed him.
Very convenient. The two guys, and they didn't know what was going on. They were scared.
Yeah.
Who are these three men on my ship?
It kind of hints that there was a lot of sympathy for the South.
Yeah, and a lot of lawyers getting in after the fact going, you might want to say this.
Yeah.
You might not want to say you arranged, and you might want to just say it's a lucky happenstance. So, yeah, you know what was happening.
It's a harbor. There was a boat there. What can I do?
It happens. And two strong-armed fishermen that just happened to be coming in at the right time, and Almond just happened to say, go to George Wade. So, yeah, now we're into the final part of this, and that's the aftermath. It's the diplomatic fallout that we still first have to deal with. So the U.S. begrudgingly gave a half-hearted apology for the actions of Captain Nichols in taking the Chesapeake and boarding the investigator, and said he would be reprimanded. Now, I couldn't find what his reprimand was.
Yeah, it probably wasn't much.
Don't do it again?
Yeah.
Probably.
A note in his file.
Oh, come on. Not a note in my file. Those things are permanent. Now, U.S. was not happy that the Chesapeake was taken Admiralty court because they thought, no, you just give it. There's no legitimacy to this letter or mark. There's nothing that needs to be heard. But their vessel was taken into British custody. Population, I would say, was really divided on this, on supporting the pirates of the Chesapeake and ones that were saying this is an embarrassment to our region.
You read newspaper accounts of the time, and, it's brought up today that the media is biased one way or the other. Well, back in the 1860s, depending on which newspaper you read, it was either slanted pro-North or slanted pro-South.
Oh, yeah. There might have been a bit of yellow journalism like it's always has, right?
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I got to finish the Brain story, and we're getting on to St. John, but they go hard to try to find Brain, and Brain ends up escaping the St. John, where he lives it up, and they finally go, okay, we're issuing a warrant for Brain, and Brain gets wind of it, and he's in the wind. He escapes from St. John, and they start this huge manhunt. Get this, okay, huge manhunt, and they find out, Troy, he's on a train destined to Halifax. And they go, we got you, Brain, we got you. They send out 100 soldiers to meet the train. 100 soldiers to take Brain into custody, and they stop the train. They get on, and he's not there. It was a scam, and he goes off to Bermuda.
Yeah, he gets out of Dodge pretty quick,
and he does this twice again. He hijacks 2 other vessels in his career. Huh?
Yeah,
Brain. So we have the Chesapeake confined in the court systems in Halifax, but we have the Chesapeake pirates are scattered all over Nova Scotia, and a bunch of them head back to St. John. They're trying to think of, what are we going to do about this? Because we can't just turn a blind eye to this kind of piracy, because we're going to get into it with the United States. This is a diplomatic disaster. This could, again, pull Britain into the war. This has the potential of doing this. We have to be seen as taking reasonable steps. They go, you know what we're going to do in St. John? We're going to issue warrants for the arrest. Now, it is not to arrest them for piracy and felony murder, because they can't. It's to arrest them for extradition to the United States to face charges of felony murder and piracy. There was a lot of back and forth at the time of going, how do we do this? We don't even know that they're in St. John. Usually you can't do a warrant unless you know that they're in the jurisdiction. But they go, yeah, we'll get over that legal hurdle. They do it. They don't do it for Lock and Brain. And I don't think they do it for Parr. For some reason, they didn't include all of them in that, but then they put out the warrant. And that brings in, there's our 3 guys we talked about at that first meeting in West St. John, and it was David Collins, James McKinley, and our jailbird, Linus Seeley. Well, they issue the warrant and they find them in St. John.
Oh, yeah, they pick them up really, really quick.
Oh, they picked them up really quickly because I think they weren't even trying to hide. Like they were just drinking at the local bar, reminiscing about the good times in New York City. And then the police come in, they get arrested, and they're thrown in jail to face an extradition hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens with that?
Well, they had a pretty good lawyer.
They had a pretty good lawyer who professed that he was hired by the Confederate government and Jefferson Davis, but there was nothing. Likely he was hired by Southern sympathizers in Halifax and St. John. Now, did they try to say, no, these guys weren't guilty of piracy and felony murder? And that there's no basis for an extradition order because there's no proof? No, they didn't. They went on technicalities. They started attacking the warrant.
They went after the warrant, saying it wasn't written properly. It should have come from the lieutenant governor, not the local magistrate. The local magistrate didn't have authority. Yeah.
Okay, so Troy, in my business, that's called throwing Hail Marys, okay? Is that you can't, the substantive things you can't deal with, let's throw whatever.
Yeah.
They weren't successful. The court in St. John goes, smoke and mirrors, guys, smoke and mirrors. Extradition is ordered. The 3 St. Johners are going to be extradited to the United States to face charges of piracy and felony murder. Now, what are the consequences of that if they were found guilty in the United States?
Probably meet the short end of a rope.
Oh, you better believe it. They're looking at the death penalties. They are worried, and so are the people in St. John, because St. Johners were supporting them.
Yeah, during their hearings, the courtroom was packed with supporters wanting to see these fellas freed. Yeah, lots of supporters.
Now, the United States got a little ahead of themselves because before the ink was dried on the extradition order, they sent the USS Miami up to take possession of the prisoners for extradition and go grab the Chesapeake, even though it hasn't been dealt with yet in the court in Halifax. So they're on their way to pick up their guys. But defense counsel appeals.
Yes.
They appeal to the Supreme Court in New Brunswick, who happen to be Justice William Johnstone Ritchie of the Ritchie Building, which I'm sure you've gone to O'Leary's a few times, Troy.
Yeah.
Ritchie just happens to be the brother-in-law to whom?
Full in Nova Scotia, Dr. Ullman.
Okay. It's got a stinky, isn't it? Does it have like a little bit of conspiracy theory kind of?
For sure.
Okay. So Ritchie is a brother to a Halifax lawyer by the name of Ritchie too, who just happened to be acting for the Confederacy in the Chesapeake affair.
Yeah, but the lawyer that the 3 lads in St. John had, John Hamilton Gray. If people are familiar with the Fathers of Confederation, John Hamilton Gray of New Brunswick is one of them.
So it's good. Okay, so they're going, Ritchie, please help us. This lower court did a foolish decision. Justice Ritchie, he heard the decision, and he was actually at the Ritchie Building. Now, it burned down in the Great Fire, so it's the predecessor of the Ritchie Building we see today in St. John, and the entire city gathered around to hear the verdict. Ritchie's in his chamber. He's going, I'm writing this up. And he comes up, and I don't know why he didn't go to the courthouse to deliver this, why he would have given it from his chambers in the Ritchie Building. But whatever the system was back then, maybe the appellate court was heard in the Ritchie Building. But he came out and he goes, I am vacating the extradition order due to technicalities. And cheers went up from the citizens of St. John. Huzzah, they said, huzzah, Justice Ritchie, huzzah to the pirates of the Chesapeake. So they were let go. The Americans were pissed. They accused Judge Ritchie, no surprise, of bias. And bias being cheered on, they said, this is the quote, by the St. John mob.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's a quote from them, because while the appeal was happening, The three of them, McKinley and Seeley and Collins, they were let free to roam the streets of St. John. Here's the quote coming from an American official. A criminal could now murder the governor of Massachusetts, travel to the provinces, and walk the streets of St. John for 20 days with impunity.
Yeah.
Does it sound like St. John?
It does, kind of.
Maybe. Okay, so the U.S. was worried about the precedent that no one was brought to justice, but guess what? After all of this, was anyone brought to justice?
No.
Nope.
No.
Let's finish off the story with the Chesapeake. What happened with the Chesapeake and sitting in Halifax?
They sent it back to its original owner.
They determined, no, the letter of marque is not valid.
It's no good. Yeah.
And they tried to go after people for the revenue. That wasn't successful either. So trying to do the Al Capone to bring these guys down. Nope. No one was willing to convict them. They
did charge McKinnon, Seeley, and the other fella with under the Foreign Enlistment Act. A warrant was written for their arrest, but it was never executed. They just let them go.
And the thing is, they were so slow, right? So the local magistrate was going, oh, there's a warrant for this under the Foreign Enlistment Act. Yeah, we'll get to it. And at the time, McKinley, Collins, and Seeley were tipped off that there was a warrant, and they took off. And from what I found, never heard from again.
Well, actually, about 10 years later, over on the west side, Seeley was killed in a street brawl.
Okay. Seeley's our guy.
Yeah.
He was killed in a street brawl.
Yeah. Oh, a fight on the street. I've just started digging into that aspect.
Oh, please keep on digging, because that's an episode. I want to pitch this. I want a St. John Nothing Happened Here Linus Seeley episode, because this guy seems like he's fascinating.
Oh, geez, yeah. I imagine his rap sheet is pretty long because he was well known.
So get this, Troy. A Confederate plot developed and put into action in St. John, New Brunswick almost pulls the British Empire into the American Civil War. And where it began, it ended with the exoneration of the Chesapeake pirates in St. John, New Brunswick. And that is the podcast. And Troy, proof once again, St. John, nothing happened here.
Thank you for listening to St. John, Nothing Happened Here. To learn more, join us at www.nothinghappenedhere.ca or connect with us on Facebook. Other means of communication include, but are not limited to, telegrams, smoke signals, and carrier pigeons. However you want to reach us, we want to hear from you.